Council President Arcaro, we are live and recording, and I believe everybody is present.
Okay, thanks. County City Council for October 26, 2020 is now in session. Roll call, please.
Pardon me, Council President, Mr. Arcaro,
Present?
Mr. Emery,
Here.
Mr. Goff,
Here.
Mr. Kozeski,
Here.
Mrs. Ledford,
Here.
Mrs. McVoy,
Here.
Mr. Moiseo,
Here.
City Manager, Mr. Hockaday,
Here.
Finance Director, Mr. Williams,
Here.
Law Director, Mr. Smith.
Here.
Okay, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible,
liberty,
liberty, and justice for all.
We move on to approve the meeting minutes for October 13th, 2020. Are there any alterations or corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I make a motion.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Mosio.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozeski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, the meeting minutes for October 13th have been approved. We have no presentations tonight, so we'll move on to citizen comments. Does anybody have any citizen comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to communications.
I have none this evening.
Does council have any communications? Okay, hearing none, move on to reports for administration, beginning with City Manager, Mr. Hockaday.
Thank you, Council President Arcaro. I have just a couple quick things for you this evening. Obviously, we've had a great deal of discussion about CARES Act. We've gone through several different iterations of things that we'll be utilizing moving forward, whether it be new technology or barriers to provide for staff. But we have a couple ordinances on tonight in terms of how we're going to handle it. As you all know, it must be fully encumbered by November 20th and fully expended by December 15th of this year, which is an incredibly tight timeline. What Mr. Williams, and I give a lot of credit to Mr. Williams and hunting this down, particularly with our auditor on what an appropriate expenditure is. We are able to certify that according to the expenditures that we've already made for staff substantially dedicated to COVID response. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but that has been a major area of time that administration has committed to figuring out how to use these funds appropriately and in the best interest of the community. I feel like this option will give council the most options and a little more time to consider some alternative technology pieces as well. We have begun identifying some broader needs. I've had several department heads turn in their capital budget requests for 2021. My intention is to kind of start with a rough draft overview of the capital budget request for 2021 at our next work session in November. And then we can probably have some additional work sessions that council typically sets out in November to discuss budget items. Obviously, we're a little bit compressed this year because of the COVID funds and what role it's going to play in our carryover and fund balances. And so after tonight's meeting, hopefully we're in a better position to project what our fund balances will look like, so we can give you a more accurate picture for 2021. The couple things that I do also want to talk about in there is the Conneaut Port Authority. The Conneaut Port Authority is looking to take on some new projects. We will need to discuss that at our work session coming up in November. I'd like to probably have a quick overview conversation with Council President Arcaro about some of these items, that deal with the revolving note that they have with the city. They've utilized the city's credit to make larger purchases in the past. They've always been in good standing with the city. So we look to continue to support their future endeavors. And I think they're looking at moving some larger projects forward. So certainly a conversation we'll be needing to have this coming Monday. And lastly, I did have some good conversations with the County Brownfield Coalition, the Asheville County Brownfield Coalition, which consists, I believe, of the County Port Authority, the County Land Bank, Growth Partnership, as well as the Department of Community Services and Planning. And we think we've identified a couple properties that they may utilize some already allocated grant funding to do some environmental work on, which is phase 1 and phase 2. So I look forward to continue to working with them on some brownfield properties that we hope to get some updated testing on or complete some new testing on. So appreciate their assistance. We're in the process of qualifying one of those properties with the Ohio EPA right now. So assuming it is qualified, we will be able to move forward with some phase 1 and phase 2 activities on that property. So more to come on that. And then trying to look down my list here very quickly. I will share with you that I anticipate demolitions of 299 Cleveland, 175 15th Street, and 396 Madison will start shortly. Those have been out to bid. They have been awarded by the county. Adams Services out of Austinburg was the low bidder. I believe they are going to start at 299 Cleveland and then move to the 15th Street property, and then lastly over to Madison Street. So we should see that engagement begin shortly. It's been a little while since we've had some active demolitions, so it's nice to see this move forward. And this comes out of, I believe, the county's CDBG funds. So this is not technically an NIP activity. So we're excited to see some of those longstanding nuisance properties come down. They are still working over on Chestnut Street. They continue to move forward. I know the rain has made it a little tough over the last week for them to work every day. They have been doing a little better job of communicating work schedules in advance, so I appreciate that. We've had an inspector on site all day, every day, while they are working there. And we've offered additional police presence during pickup and drop-off times to kind of ease some of the burden of traffic and congestion, make sure people are staying calm and patient while we're in a work zone and there's some school children out there. So just want to keep everybody safe. It'll be a nice project when it's done, and hopefully it adds a great deal more safety to the area. So I'm not going to go through police and fire. They're attached for your perusal. Couple other mentions, though it's a little subdued in a global pandemic year. This is Red Ribbon Week, and which actually started last Friday. And Red Ribbon Week is intended to highlight some of the issues and challenges around opioids and opioid addictions in our society. unfortunately, during COVID, I think a lot of those issues of people that already have dependency issues have been exacerbated. They're either cut off from family members or support systems or resources. County 211 system is always available. They have what they call a warm line for anybody that's having issues or needs to talk to somebody. They can call that number, 211. We, as always, have a drop-off box in our police station. I know with the new COVID protocols, we are happy to make arrangements. So if you want to call our non-emergency line at the police department, if you have unused medications that are laying around, it's always a good idea to get rid of them. Make sure they're not there for somebody else to take. We have had a drug drop-off this year that was really successful. It's been a little bit different. I also wanted to note to people that there is a Sharps drop box at the front of the building. It's on the exterior of the building. So if you have used Sharps, put them in a safe container, and there is a drop-off container at the front of the building. So just making sure that those things don't get into the wrong hands, and certainly making people aware of the issue. You can see on the last page of the fire department report our suspected, and I use that, Narcan administrations, as well as suspected overdose deaths. And so far through 2020, we suspect that it was a major contributor in at least 3 deaths just in the city of Conneaut in 2020. That's a very significant number, and you can see kind of the call log. At the beginning of March and April, when everything was locked down, and in May, really when the lockdown kind of ended, we had 7 different administrations just in that month alone. That was one of our busiest months. So it's something that I just want to bring everybody's attention to and talk about the importance of it. I know many of you on council, particularly Lieutenant Moisio, know exactly the mental health toll, as well as for those people that have dependencies on drugs and alcohol and other things, the toll this pandemic has played. And there are resources out there. And if anybody's looking for more resources, contact the police department or non-emergency dispatch, you can contact my office and we will make sure we get in touch with you. Or the easiest number is 211. Thank you. That's all I have.
Hey, Mr. Hockaday, did you happen to get a report on how well the drop-off went at the hospital this past weekend?
I did not get a report on that, but I can find out and report back. So I'll get that number for you.
Okay, that'd be interesting to know.
I will note, in the past, we've had upwards of 200 pounds of drugs collected at any one annual drop-off program. I mean, it's usually a very substantial number.
So, Mr. Hockaday, today was Take Back Day. I didn't note Conneaut's total, but I think countywide there was 1,471 pounds, approximately, that was collected today.
Wow.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments for the city manager? Okay, if now we'll move on to Finance Director, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Arcaro. I just wanted to remind council that I did email the budgetary and bank reports for the month ending in September. If you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I just wanted to briefly go over just a couple items that are on the agenda for tonight regarding the Corona relief funds. In order to use these funds, what we've decided to do is to use a transfer to cover the payroll and benefits of our safety forces, including police, fire, dispatchers, corrections, and health department. In order to use those funds, we have to demonstrate that we've actually incurred these expenses or will incur these expenses. And as Mr. Hockaday had indicated, we have to have these funds encumbered and expended by the end of the year. I gave you a spreadsheet, which is wages and benefits year to date. I did through 10/21 for all the wages and the pertinent wages and benefits of our safety forces. I backed out any expenditures from January 1 through March 1st. And then the last column is COVID eligible. So for the general fund, we had about 1.8 million, 1.843 million in expenditures through 10/21. And that includes healthcare, pension benefits, overtime. Through 1131, we had about 531,000 that we had to back out, which leaves COVID eligible in the general fund of 1.312 million. That's about a $220,000 excess. So we've actually exceeded the amount that we intend to transfer to the general fund to cover these expenditures. But I also included the expenditures and the levies for the safety forces, police, dispatch, and corrections. If we include that total, we're looking at 2.8 million. If we back out the total between the general fund and the levies, it'd be 665,000, which would leave 2.1 million, almost 2.2 million, or a 1.1 million excess. We want to focus on the general fund because that's where we've seen most of the decline in our revenue and increased expenditures. So we would rather reimburse the general fund for these expenditures. But as indicated in there, we're allowed to go through December 31st. So by the time December 31st rolls around, we'll have an additional 800,000 in expenditures. So there's more than enough to offset the Corona relief funding. We did receive 3 different amounts from the county. 427,787 was received in July, 212,599 in September, and 451,527 in October, for a total of $1,091,914.01. So there's also a provision in there where we are supposed to accrue interest on these funds. But I have not done that. And the reason being is that we've already expended these funds. So we're actually reimbursing ourselves. So there's no need to accrue interest on these federal funds. So that's why you don't see that in there. And then there's one other thing. So what we're doing is tonight we're going to appropriate the additional amount of $664,127 in the transfer line item. And then we're going to transfer the total of the $1,091,914 to the general fund. Now we could have done this a couple different ways, or another different way that was some communities are doing, and basically what they're doing are expenditure adjustments. They're reducing their general fund expenditures and charging it back to the Corona Relief Fund. The reason I don't like doing that is because those expenditures were properly reflected in all of the account lines in the general fund. And for comparison purposes, I'd like to leave them in there. This is much cleaner by just doing a cash transfer from the Corona Fund to the general fund. And that way those expenditures are going to be reflected as they were. And we'll just have the additional cash in the general fund. And then we can reuse that additional fund balance for other COVID related expenditures. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the finance director? Okay, if not, I'll move on to the law director, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Arcaro. Whoops, I'm going to have to turn that. Can you turn it down?
Mute your mic.
Okay.
We can't hear you now, Kyle.
Okay,
Is that any better?
yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, just several things. First of all, we've been reviewing and drafting various contractual matters, leases, sales agreements, and other documents involving both the city and the Conneaut Port Authority. Some of these have made it into final draft. Some of them are in passing back and forth drafts. Spent an evening with the Port Authority on open meetings and public records. We have also done some civil work on a dilapidated house at 294 Harbor Street. We're seeking what's known as a default judgment against the Hendersons for a vacant and falling apart house. We spent an evening with the Utility Commission over B&B ordinances, the B&B ordinance, and I think there'll be another meeting coming up on that shortly, but it's an involved process. Can't read my handwriting. Anyway, the other thing, the most notable thing is that we interviewed 12 candidates to replace Chris Newcomb, who will be leaving at the end of this month. We advertised in Ashtabula County, Lake County, Geauga County, and Trumbull County in the bar associations. And we're very lucky and very pleased to announce that our new replacement will be Jacqueline O'Donnell. She's an attorney from Geauga County who spent 8 years prosecuting full-time cases, felonies, for the Geauga County Prosecutor's Office. We're very excited to have her. And you'll note that there's a nice little resolution put together for Chris for his last week here. I think that's what I have, or at least all I can read. So, any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, we'll move on to reports of our standing committees. Does anybody have a committee report?
I
President
have a
Arthur,
report.
I heard
Go ahead, Mr. McBoy.
oh, you can go, Tammy.
Are you
Mine's,
sure?
yeah, mine's just a reminder to the public. It's okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. There was a utilities committee meeting this past Wednesday on October 13th, as Mr. Smith alluded to. We went over the proposed amendments for the bed and breakfast and short-term rentals. I thought it was very fruitful. Got through most of the amendments with comments and suggestions from Mr. Smith. I plan on attending the next planning commission meeting because we'll be going over that there. And then we will also, after that night, schedule another utilities meeting to kind of solidify some of these changes and move this forward. So, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. McBoy?
Thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know a reminder from the Conneaut Health Department that they are doing the flu. Excuse me, my dog's going to bark during the middle of my conversation. That they are doing the flu clinic for the city. They are doing it differently though for COVID this year. So make sure that if you need to get your flu shot, you call to schedule that with the Conneaut Health Department, and their number is 440-593-3087. And that's it. I just want to put that reminder out there for our community.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee reports? Okay, liaison reports. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our ordinances and resolutions for tonight. We have 6 ordinances and resolutions in first reading to consider, and we will begin with resolution 87-20.
A resolution declaring October 23rd through October 31st, 2020 as Red Ribbon Week in the city of Conneaut.
Okay, I believe Mr. Hockaday explained that earlier during his report. Are there any further questions or comments regarding Resolution 87-20? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
I'd like to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 87-20.
Motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on Resolution 87-20. Is there a second?
I'll
I
second.
second.
Second by Mrs. McVoy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Emery, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
Thank you. I'd like to motion to act on resolution 87-20.
A motion to act on Resolution 87-20. Is there a second?
I
Second.
second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, Resolution 87-20 is passed. Move on to Ordinance 88-20.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to execute a facilities lease agreement with TW Natural Gas Pipeline LLC and Utility Technologies International Corp. And declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Hockaday.
So what this is over the past many months, we placed an RFP out there for utilization of the gas tap that was installed on the Reedsburg pipeline in the area of Route 7. We received a singular proposal, and this is the lease agreement that has emerged from this, which is a lease of our gas tap into a system that would operate as a distribution system for a variety of potential existing and potential customers in the area of Route 7 and 90. One thing that I'll add is we had a conference call, and by we, I mean the law director, Mr. Smith, and I, some minor language edits at most. They're asking for some more time to review a couple components of language. So I would either recommend that council table this ordinance for the time being, or just simply place it in the second reading and let it go. Our next meeting will not be until November 9th. Either one would be appropriate, but they asked for some additional time to review and return some revised language to us. So we're kind of at their timeline at this juncture.
Okay. Is there a motion to proceed?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Arcaro, to table ordinance 88-20.
Motion to table Ordinance 88-20. Is there a second?
I second.
I second.
I didn't catch who seconded. I'm sorry.
Mrs. McVoy, I believe.
Thank you. Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yeah.
The Ordinance 88-20 has been tabled. Move on to Ordinance 89-20.
An ordinance to declare work of employees of the Conneaut Police and Fire Departments, dispatchers, corrections officers, and employees of the Conneaut Health Department is substantially dedicated to COVID-19 response and declaring an emergency.
Okay, we heard Mr. Williams' explanation. Mr. Hockaday, do you have anything further to add?
The only thing that I would add is we have reviewed that list of additional expenditures. That was a little over $300,000 at last review. By doing it the way that Mr. Williams and I are recommending, we can still do those, but it gives us a little additional time and flexibility to do those because this is the one and singular transfer that we're going to make for full utilization of the funds. Any future use of those funds, COVID related or not, can be done at council's exclusive discretion.
Okay, any questions or comments regarding ordinance 8920? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
Make a motion to declare ordinance 8920 an emergency.
So motion to declare ordinance 8920 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Mr. Mosio, the emergency has been declared.
Make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 89-20.
There's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 89-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes. Mr.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Mr. Mosio, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
Make a motion to act on ordinance 89-20.
So motion to act on ordinance 89-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
The ordinance 89-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 90-20.
An ordinance to appropriate $664,127 to line item 259-901-59300, transfers within the coronavirus relief fund.
Okay, we heard Mr. Williams' explanation. Are there any additional questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
I'll make a motion to waive the 3 reading rule on ordinance 90-20.
It's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 90-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mosio.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes,
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Hey, Mrs. Ledford, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
this time I'd like to act on ordinance 90-20.
So motion to act on ordinance 90-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mosio.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes,
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
The ordinance 90-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 91-20.
An ordinance to transfer a total of $1,091,914 from 259-901-59300 transfers within the coronavirus relief fund to 101-931-49300 transfers within the general fund.
Okay, again, we heard Mr. Williams' explanation. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
I'll make a motion to waive the 3 reading rule on ordinance 91-20.
Motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 91-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Kozowski, the three reading rule has been suspended.
I move we act on 91-20.
The motion to act on ordinance 91-20, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Moiseo.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gaw,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
The ordinance 91-20 has passed. Move on to resolution 92-20.
A resolution to recognize Assistant Law Director Christopher M. Newcomb for his service to the city of Conneaut.
Okay, Ms. O'Connell, could you read the whereas into the record, please?
Yes. Whereas Christopher Chris Newcomb began his service to the city of Conneaut in May 2017 as the Assistant Law Director and handled at least 7 jury trials, hundreds of preliminary hearings, and more than 1,000 pre-trials, reviewed thousands of police reports, and attended dozens of council meetings. Whereas Chris somehow balanced his duties as Assistant Law Director with the responsibilities of managing his growing law practice, delicately dancing around potential conflicts between clients and city duties, maintaining high standards set by the municipal court, providing unmatched attention and love to 2 really spectacular little girls, and in his spare time, coaching baseball and helping his brother make wings, sliders, and sausages. Whereas Chris has tendered his resignation effective November 1, 2020, in order to focus more on his family and law practice and make more sausages. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Conneaut City Council herein expresses its deepest appreciation and gratitude to Christopher M. Newcomb for his public service through challenging times and extends to him our best wishes for continued success in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? There's probably no questions. How about any comments?
I would like to thank Mr. Newcomb for his years of service to the city. Very much appreciated.
Me
Absolutely.
too. I'd like to wish him all the best. We'll miss you.
Yep. Same here.
Same here.
Same here.
Same here also, and I think we're really going to miss Chris. He's done a very professional, excellent job. I've done some work for Chris in the past, and I've always found him to be very professional, and he had a very good personality that went along with it, and that's going to make him go a long way in his practice.
I agree. Nick or Chris did a good job, and he's definitely going to be missed. I worked with him when I was on council before, and he did a fine job then. So, Mr. Smith, would you have anything to add?
Nothing further.
Okay, with that, entertain a motion to proceed.
I'll make a motion to waive the 3 reading rule, ordinance 92-20.
Okay, there's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on resolution 92-20. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gaw,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Kozowski, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I move we act on resolution 92-20.
The motion to act on resolution 92-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gaw,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 92-20 has passed, and congratulations on Chris for his retiring there from the city. Move on to unfinished and old business. Okay, hearing none, move on to miscellaneous business.
I have something for Mr. Hockaday. Mr. Hockaday, are we going to have leaf pickup this year?
Yes, we can. I don't have a schedule published. Obviously, we've been dealing with some other crises, so we can have something probably put out. We usually break it by zone and day, so I'll have to talk to Joe, but I can get something published here probably this week. I apologize. That's my drop. It wasn't on my radar.
No, I just happened to think of it, so I figured I'd just bring it up and ask the questions. And I didn't know if we were able to or what the situation was. So
we've been a little short-staffed, and we have a couple projects that have been delayed a little later in the season. So those are our priorities. But we spent some time talking this last several weeks about utilizing some of our water distribution crews as well as our sanitary maintenance crews to help buttress Public Works, who, are, as you guys all know, are down in manpower due to COVID, and some budgetary cuts that we had to make early on in order to make sure that we preserve some fund balance. They are going to continue to support Public Works throughout the fall and winter here, and will likely play an augmented role in 2020 in snow and ice removal as well. So I can get you a final schedule, and I'll need to talk with our Public Works Director, Joe DeBell, and we'll get something together for you as well. On that note of things that I've forgotten, I did forget to mention that Trick or Treat is this Saturday, October 31st from 4 to 6. All the guidelines that were agreed upon by our health department as well as the rest of the Ashtabula County health departments, including Ashtabula City and the county, are posted on the front page of the website. I suggest and recommend parents take a look at them, make sure that you're following social distancing rules, and just good general advice for safe trick-or-treating every year. It's also a reminder that clocks fall back. It is daylight savings this Saturday as well, which is always a really good time to check the batteries in your smoke detectors and smoke alarms as people's furnaces are starting to turn on due to the colder weather. It's a good idea to do that too. So 2 general reminders I forgot to mention in my report.
Hey, Mr. Hockaday, I have one thing. The Broad Street and Lake Road paving project, I see they're hopefully buttoning up. The end of the contract is Halloween as well, is it not?
It is, and they still have some manholes to level. I believe they've cut them all, but there were several that were still pending leveling. And they, by the middle of last week, I know there's been some rain days recently, which might give them some extension. If weather is unworkable, sometimes that can add to the cutoff date. I know Jonathan Dutt, the managing engineer for ODOT, requested a punch list from the city on any city items that we felt needed addressed, and those were all furnished and by the 16th. And I will follow up with Jonathan to see on some of the resolution of those punch list items, which he was going to return to me with completion. So I'll find out and let you know this week.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody else have any miscellaneous business? Okay, just a reminder for everybody to be safe on Halloween. It's going to be a little different this year, but there are still going to be people out and about, so just definitely be safe and be aware. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Ricker.
Mr. Mosio made the motion.
I'll
There's a
second.
second by Mrs. McVoy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yeah.
Okay, council for October 26th is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you. Have a good evening.